My wife's family humiliated me as poor at dinner. Then my brother's friend mentioned my jet. Tobias Crawford's wife's family had just spent 20 minutes criticizing him as the husband without ambition at dinner. The old Honda, freelance work, simple lifestyle, all evidence that their daughter had chosen wrong. He sat there swallowing every insult in silence. For 3 years, they had looked at him like a failure next to their success. They didn't know that he had been secretly controlling every dollar in this house. And when the truth was revealed, they would pay dearly for those contemptuous words. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this dramatic story, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales. Let me know in the comments. Are you watching from Jamaica, Orlando, Atlanta, or maybe Albuquerque? Now back to Tobias Crawford as he's about to teach his judgmental in-laws the most expensive lesson of their lives. The crystal chandelier illuminated the mahogany dining table in the Blackwood family's million-dollar mansion in Buckhead, but 35-year-old Tobias Crawford felt only the chill of their judgment. Esther Blackwood, 58, and every inch the successful CEO of her investment firm, gestured dismissively toward the window where his Honda Accord sat between luxury vehicles. "Toby, your car looks so modest next to the others." Her husband Augustus, a 60-year-old cardiothoracic surgeon with silver temples, nodded thoughtfully as if diagnosing a terminal condition. 30-year-old Imani Crawford squeezed her husband's hand under the table, a gesture of support that had become routine during these monthly family gatherings over their 3 years of marriage. Rashad Pierce, the 37-year-old law firm partner who had married into the family, leaned back with practiced confidence. "You know what separates successful people from dreamers, Toby? Vision. My firm just secured the Meridian Development Project, biggest contract in Atlanta this year." He swirled his wine, letting the achievement hang in the air like expensive cologne. Across the table, 34-year-old Kendrick Bell, founder of a profitable tech startup, nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. It's about building something that lasts, something with real value. My startup just moved into that new Buckhead Tower. Prime real estate, prime location." The familiar weight of their success stories pressed down on Toby's shoulders. 3 years of these dinners had taught him exactly how this family operated, through subtle humiliation disguised as concern. He maintained his composed expression while his mind drifted to a painful memory from 5 years ago. Vanessa's beautiful face twisted with disgust when she accidentally discovered his wealth, her immediate transformation from loving fiancé to calculating gold digger. "I need financial security, not love," she had said before leaving him for an older, more obviously wealthy man. That betrayal had shattered something inside him, teaching him the cruel lesson that people showed their true nature when they thought you had nothing to offer. The trauma of Vanessa's betrayal had changed everything about how Toby approached relationships. When he met Imani at that art gallery 4 years ago, he made a conscious decision to test not just her, but her entire family. He wanted to see if anyone could love him for his character rather than his bank account. For 3 years, he had maintained his cover as a struggling freelance architect, driving his modest Honda while his Porsche and Tesla sat in a private garage across town. He lived in their small home while his mansion remained empty, all to answer one crucial question: could they accept him for who he truly was? "At your age, most successful men have established practices," Augustus said with surgical precision. "You're still exploring your options?" The question carried decades of medical authority, as if Toby's life choices were symptoms of some underlying pathology. Esther nodded sagely, her investment banker instincts sensing weakness. "Our family understands the importance of building generational wealth. 3 generations of doctors, lawyers, and business leaders." She paused dramatically, her eyes boring into Toby with calculating intensity. "What exactly are you bringing to the table for our daughter?" The question hit like a physical blow, designed to expose what they saw as his fundamental inadequacy. Toby felt the familiar sting, but underneath lay a bitter irony they couldn't possibly understand. His architectural empire, carefully hidden behind shell companies and legal structures, controlled more wealth than their entire family combined. TC Designs had become one of Atlanta's most successful architectural firms, while TCC Holdings managed premium properties throughout the city's most desirable districts. He had learned to hide his success behind professional aliases and shell companies, ensuring that a simple Google search for Tobias Crawford would never reveal his true financial status. Amani's grip on his hand tightened, her silent support the only bright spot in this elaborate test. She had proven herself repeatedly over their relationship, loving him when she believed he had little to offer beyond his character and dreams. While her family saw failure, she saw the man who made her laugh, who listened to her concerns, who treated her with respect and genuine affection. "Mom, maybe we could talk about something else," she suggested gently. But Esther dismissed her daughter's intervention with a whim of her manicured hand. The conversation continued its predictable trajectory as Rashad detailed his law firm's expansion plans and Kendrick outlined his startup's latest venture capital funding. Toby listened carefully, filing away details that would prove useful later. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was how intimately their success stories intersected with his hidden business empire. The Meridian project Rashad had mentioned, Tease. Designs had submitted the winning architectural proposal. Kendrick's prestigious office building? It was owned by TCC Holdings and managed through one of Toby's subsidiary companies. As the evening wore on, Toby reflected on the 3 years he had spent enduring their systematic humiliation. 3 years of biting his tongue while they questioned his ambition, his vision, his worthiness as a husband for their precious daughter. 3 years of watching them fail the most basic test of human decency, the ability to judge someone by their character rather than their possessions. He had given them every opportunity to see past appearances, to recognize the intelligent, successful man beneath the modest exterior. They had failed spectacularly, revealing themselves as exactly the kind of shallow, materialistic people he had learned to avoid. The irony wasn't lost on him that their own success depended more heavily on his business network than they would ever imagine. Every month he sat at their table and absorbed their condescension while secretly controlling significant portions of the economic ecosystem that sustained their lifestyle. He had wanted them to accept him as family, to welcome him into their circle based on love and respect. Instead, they had chosen to make him feel like an outsider, unworthy of their daughter, inadequate by their standards. Toby smiled quietly to himself as dessert was served, thinking about how dramatically their perception would change once the truth emerged. For 3 years, he had been the patient architect of this elaborate test, measuring their character against his own moral standards. They had failed completely, proving themselves to be exactly the kind of people who valued wealth over integrity, status over substance. Soon, very soon, they would learn the price of their shallow judgment, and he would finally have the answer to the question that had driven this entire charade. Were they worthy of his respect? Or did they deserve to learn a lesson about the dangers of underestimating others? The evening air grew heavier as the family moved to the living room, their conversation flowing like poison through crystal glasses. Esther Blackwood settled into her leather armchair with the grace of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms, her eyes scanning Toby with renewed focus. "You know, Toby, every time I see that Honda Accord in our driveway, it looks so quaint next to Rashad's Bentley." She paused, letting the comparison sink in like a blade finding its mark. "It makes me wonder about long-term planning, about building something substantial for the future." Augustus nodded from his position by the fireplace, his surgeon's hands clasped behind his back as he prepared to deliver his own precise cut. "At your age, most successful men have established practices," Augustus said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in medicine. "Partnerships, equity positions, something beyond project to project, survival. You're still exploring your options?" The question hung in the air like a diagnosis, clinical and damning. Rashad leaned forward from the sofa, his expensive suit catching the lamplight as he prepared to demonstrate exactly what success looked like. "Take my firm, for example. We just bought the building next door for expansion. $12 million investment, but that's what growth requires. Vision and capital working together." Kendrick couldn't resist joining the display of prosperity, his startup founder enthusiasm bubbling over. "Absolutely. My company just secured Series B funding, $15 million. We're moving our entire operation to that new Buckhead Tower, premium office space with panoramic city views. Plus, we're looking at private school options for when we have kids." He gestured broadly, as if encompassing all their achievements. "It's about building an empire that lasts generations, creating something meaningful for your children to inherit." The casual mention of legacy and inheritance triggered something deep in Toby's memory, dragging him back 5 years to a conversation that had shattered his faith in human nature. Vanessa Richardson had been everything he thought he wanted: intelligent, beautiful, seemingly genuine in her affection. For 6 months, she had played the role of supportive girlfriend while he maintained his cover as a struggling architectural freelancer. She would cook dinner in his modest apartment, encourage his dreams, and speak passionately about how love mattered more than money. Her performance had been flawless, right up until the moment it all fell apart. The memory played out with crystal clarity. Vanessa arriving unexpectedly at his office, catching him in a meeting with major developers about a $20 million project. Her eyes had widened as she took in the expensive conference room, the scale models of luxury developments, the obvious evidence of his true success. Within hours, everything changed. The woman who had claimed to love his struggling artist persona suddenly became fascinated by his business empire, asking detailed questions about his net worth and investment portfolio. "I need financial security, not love," she had said 2 weeks later, choosing an older pharmaceutical executive over their relationship. "You understand, don't you? A girl has to think about her future." That betrayal had cut deeper than any physical wound, teaching Toby that people revealed their true nature when they thought you had nothing to offer. The trauma had fundamentally altered his approach to relationships with him, creating the elaborate testing system that had brought him to this moment. When he met Amani at that contemporary art gallery 4 years ago, her genuine laugh at his observation about a pretentious sculpture had sparked something real. But this time he was prepared. This time he would know if someone could love him for his character rather than his bank account. Their courtship had been a careful dance of authenticity and deception. Toby maintained his struggling architect persona, driving his Honda and living modestly while falling genuinely in love with Amani's intelligence and kindness. She never pressured him about money or seemed disappointed by their simple dates: coffee shops instead of fine restaurants, walks through parks rather than expensive entertainment. When she laughed at his jokes, listened to his dreams, and supported his supposed struggles, he began to believe that perhaps not everyone was motivated by greed. She had proven herself worthy of his love, but her family remained an unknown quantity. The 3 years of their marriage had only deepened his feelings for Amani while confirming his worst suspicions about her family. Every month, these dinners reinforced their shallow values and materialistic priorities. They judged him not by his character or treatment of their daughter, but by external markers of success they could easily quantify. Amani's happiness meant nothing if it came at the cost of their social status. Her love for him was irrelevant if he couldn't enhance their family's reputation in Atlanta's elite circles. What made their attitude particularly galling was how their own success intersected with his hidden empire in ways they never suspected. During his 3 years of careful observation, Toby had discovered connections that bordered on the cosmic ironic. The Meridian project that Rashad boasted about. The architectural contract had been awarded to TC Designs, one of Toby's shell companies. Kendrick's prestigious office space in the new Buckhead Tower. The building was owned and managed by TCC Holdings, another piece of Toby's carefully compartmentalized business empire. Even Esther's investment fund, which she managed with such pride, had benefited significantly from real estate developments that traced back to Toby's architectural firm. Her most profitable investments over the past 2 years included 3 major commercial projects that Crawford Development Group had designed and developed. The irony was almost too perfect. They sat in judgment of his supposed failures while their own success depended on his business acumen and financial network. Amani caught his eye from across the room, her expression mixing embarrassment and loyalty in a way that made his heart ache. She had tried countless times to bridge the gap between him and her family, defending his character while gently encouraging them to see past their prejudices. But 3 years had proven that some people were fundamentally incapable of looking beyond surface appearances. They had failed every test of basic human decency, revealing themselves to be exactly the kind of shallow, status-obsessed individuals he had learned to avoid. The realization crystallized with sudden clarity. Enough was enough. 3 years of enduring their systematic humiliation, 3 years of hoping they might evolve beyond their materialistic worldview, 3 years of giving them opportunities to prove they valued character over capital. They had failed spectacularly at every turn, choosing instead to make him feel unworthy of their daughter's love. The patient architect in him recognized that this elaborate test had reached its conclusion, and the results were definitively negative. Toby smiled quietly as he listened to their continued display of wealth and achievement, thinking about how their perception was about to undergo a seismic shift. They had spent 3 years teaching him exactly who they were beneath their polished exteriors. Now it was time for them to learn who he really was and to understand the price of their shallow judgment. The test was over and they had failed completely. What came next would be entirely their own doing, the inevitable consequence of choosing prejudice over wisdom, appearances over substance, and cruelty over compassion. The evening seemed to be winding down to its predictable conclusion when the doorbell rang, cutting through the family's continued discussion of their various achievements. Augustus glanced toward the foyer with mild irritation, but Amani was already rising from her seat. "I'll get it," she said, grateful for any interruption to the increasingly uncomfortable conversation. Toby remained seated, his expression calm, as familiar voices echoed from the entrance hall. He had been expecting this moment, though perhaps not tonight. The universe, it seemed, had decided to accelerate his timeline in the most dramatic way possible. Tyler Morrison's voice boomed through the mansion as he followed Amani back into the living room, his energy infectious even in this stuffy atmosphere. Tyler had been Kevin's best friend since college, and his presence always brought an unfiltered authenticity that made formal gatherings infinitely more interesting. "Toby!" he exclaimed, his face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "Man, I've been trying to reach you all week. I had to tell you in person, that private jet to Miami was absolutely insane, man. I mean, I've flown commercial first class, but having your own plane? That's next level stuff right there." The words hit the room like a physical force, creating a silence so complete that the grandfather clock's ticking seemed to thunder in everyone's ears. 5 faces turned toward Toby with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror, their comfortable assumptions crumbling in real time. Esther's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, while Augustus's composed medical demeanor flickered like a malfunctioning light. Rashad's confident posture deflated slightly, and Kendrick's enthusiastic expression transformed into something approaching panic. Only Amani looked confused rather than devastated, her eyes moving between Tyler and her husband as she tried to process this unexpected information. Toby felt a cold smile spreading across his face as he studied their reactions. 3 years of careful planning, 3 years of enduring their condescension, and it all came down to Tyler's innocent enthusiasm about a weekend trip. The irony was almost poetic. His brother's best friend, completely unaware of the elaborate test playing out in this room, had just delivered the knockout punch that Toby had been building toward for months. "I guess it's time you knew who you've been insulting for 3 years, he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that cut through their shock like a surgeon's scalpel. Standing slowly, Toby walked to his briefcase and retrieved his laptop, the same device he used to manage a $15 million business empire. The family watched in stunned silence as he opened it on the coffee table, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the keyboard. "Let me introduce you to TC Designs," he said, turning the screen toward them. "One of Atlanta's most successful architectural firms, responsible for some of the city's most prestigious commercial developments." The website displayed a portfolio of gleaming skyscrapers and luxury developments, each project representing millions in revenue and establishing TC Designs as a major player in Georgia's construction industry. "TC stands for Tobias Crawford, in case you're wondering," he continued, his tone conversational despite the nuclear bomb he was detonating in their living room. "I also own TCC Holdings, which manages premium real estate throughout Atlanta's most desirable districts." Another few clicks revealed a second website showcasing an impressive portfolio of commercial properties, office buildings, and luxury developments. "And then there's Crawford Development Group, my primary investment vehicle for large-scale commercial projects." The numbers on the screen spoke for themselves. Hundreds of millions in managed assets, projects spanning the southeastern United States, a business empire built over more than a decade of careful planning and strategic growth. Esther found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. This can't be real. We would have known. We would have researched." Her investment banker instincts were fighting against the evidence before her eyes, struggling to reconcile 3 years of assumptions with the devastating reality unfolding on Toby's laptop screen. Augustus remained silent, his surgeon's training evident in how he processed information methodically, checking and rechecking each detail as if looking for a flaw in a critical diagnosis. "You never researched because I made sure you couldn't find anything," Toby explained, his voice carrying a patience born of years planning this moment. "I learned to hide my wealth after being burned by a gold digger 5 years ago. Vanessa taught me that people show their true nature when they think you have nothing to offer." He closed the laptop and looked directly at each family member in turn. "I wanted to test if people could love me for who I am, not what I have. So I created professional aliases, shell companies, legal structures that kept Tobias Crawford disconnected from wealth in any public records." The explanation hit them like a second wave, the realization that his deception had been intentional and systematic rather than accidental. Rashad leaned forward, his lawyer's mind already working through the implications. "Wait, if you've been hiding this level of success, how long have you known about our businesses? Have you been investigating us?" The question carried an undercurrent of fear, the sudden understanding that they might have been as transparent to him as he had been opaque to them. Toby's smile grew colder as he prepared to deliver the final devastating blow. "Funny thing is, your family's success accidentally overlaps with my business empire in ways I only discovered after marrying Amani." He let that sink in before continuing, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. "The Meridian project that Rashad's firm is so proud of. TC Designs is the architectural firm that won that contract. We're not just involved. We're the primary designers responsible for the entire development." Kendrick's face went pale as the implications hit him. "The Buckhead Tower. Our office space?" His voice trailed off as the pieces fell into place, the prestigious address he had bragged about suddenly taking on a different meaning entirely. Toby nodded with satisfaction. "Owned and managed by TCC Holdings. Your startup has been paying rent to me for the past 18 months. Pure coincidence, but quite ironic given tonight's conversation about success and vision." Esther's investment banker training kicked in as she tried to process the full scope of what she was hearing. "Our fund's real estate investments, the commercial properties that have been our best performers." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Toby completed it for her. "3 of your fund's most profitable investments over the past 2 years were Crawford Development Group projects. Your success has been built on my business acumen, though neither of us knew it at the time." The room fell silent again as the family absorbed the full magnitude of their situation. 3 years of condescension and judgment, 3 years of treating him like an inadequate provider for their daughter, and it turned out they had been insulting someone who controlled significant portions of their own financial success. The irony was so complete it felt almost scripted, as if the universe had conspired to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Amani's voice broke through the silence, relief evident in her tone. "So, when you married me, it really was for love? This wasn't some elaborate plan to get back at my family?" The vulnerability in her question reminded Toby why he had fallen for her in the first place, her genuine concern for their relationship's authenticity even in the midst of this revelation. He took her hands in his expression softening for the first time that evening. "I married you because you proved that love matters more than money. Finding out I control your family's income was just karma." The family's meltdown began in earnest as the full implications crashed down on them. Augustus sat heavily in his chair, his medical composure cracking under the weight of realizing he had spent 3 years professionally insulting someone worth more than his entire practice. Rashad's legal mind was already calculating damages, not financial, but reputational, social, the cost of having revealed themselves as shallow and judgmental to someone who now held considerable power over their professional lives. Kendrick looked like he might be sick, the confident startup founder replaced by someone who had just realized his biggest client was the man he had been systematically belittling for years. Esther remained frozen, her investment banker instincts warring with the devastating personal reality that her daughter had married far above their family's station, while they treated him like he was beneath their notice. 3 years, Toby said quietly, his words cutting through their shock like a final verdict. 3 years I sat at this table and listened to your lectures about success, your subtle insults about my ambition, your suggestions that Amani deserved better. 3 years I gave you opportunities to judge me by my character rather than my clothes, my apparent bank account. His voice hardened with each word, the accumulated hurt and anger of countless dinners finally finding expression. You failed that test completely, revealing yourselves to be exactly the kind of people I learned to avoid. And now you know the price of shallow judgment. The revelation's immediate shock gave way to a deeper, more terrifying understanding as the Blackwood family spent the following days grappling with the true scale of their dependency on Toby's business empire. What had started as an evening of casual humiliation had transformed into a complete panic mode that consumed every aspect of their professional lives. Esther found herself unable to concentrate during board meetings, constantly checking her phone for updates that never brought good news. Augustus maintained his surgical schedule but felt distracted, his usual precision compromised by the knowledge that their family's financial foundation had just shifted beneath their feet like an earthquake. The first formal notice arrived on Monday morning, delivered by certified mail to Rashad's law firm with the clinical precision of a legal document designed to cause maximum psychological impact. TC Designs is conducting a comprehensive evaluation of our Meridian development collaboration. The letter stated in language so neutral, it felt ominous. All project milestones will be suspended pending completion of our internal review process. Rashad read the notice 3 times, his lawyer's training recognizing the careful phrasing that suggested serious consequences without making explicit threats. The Meridian project represented 40% of his firm's annual revenue, and any delay would cascade through their entire operation. By Wednesday, Kendrick's startup received its own devastating communication. The building management company sent a formal notice that their lease was under corporate policy review and that TCC Holdings is evaluating all tenant relationships for compliance with updated strategic objectives. The 30-day review period felt like a death sentence hanging over his company's future. His Series B investors had been attracted partly by their prestigious Buckhead address, and losing that office space would signal instability to everyone who mattered in Atlanta's tech ecosystem. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man he had spent 3 years belittling now controlled the very foundation of his business success. Esther's investment fund felt the pressure through a more subtle but equally effective channel. Her portfolio manager received a call from Crawford Development and Group's legal team, suggesting that potential changes in investment partnerships might affect future opportunities. Within days, 3 major real estate deals that her fund had been positioning for were quietly moved to other investment groups. 20 years of building relationships and establishing credibility in Atlanta's commercial real estate market seemed to evaporate overnight, leaving her scrambling to understand how someone she had dismissed as irrelevant could wield such devastating influence over her professional life. The systematic nature of Toby's response became clear as the second week progressed. This wasn't an emotional outburst or impulsive revenge. It was a carefully calculated economic warfare campaign executed with the precision of someone who understood exactly how Atlanta's business ecosystem functioned. Industry whispers began circulating by day 10, subtle questions about whether the Blackwood family had fallen out of favor with major development groups. The rumors carried just enough truth to be believable while remaining vague enough to spread quickly through professional networks. Rashad was the first to crack under the mounting pressure, arriving at Toby and Amani's house unannounced on a Thursday evening with the desperate energy of someone watching his life's work crumble. "Toby, we need to talk," he said, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained panic. "The Meridian project. 40% of our revenue depends on that contract. My partners are asking questions I can't answer. Please, there has to be some way we can work this out." The proud lawyer who had spent years lecturing Toby about success and vision now stood in his modest living room, hat in hand, begging for mercy from the man he had systematically humiliated. Kendrick's desperation manifested differently, but with equal intensity. His startup's board meeting on Friday had been a disaster, with investors expressing concern about operational stability and questioning their premium office lease. "Our Series B investors are asking questions about office stability," he told Toby during a frantic phone call that weekend. "They're wondering if we can maintain our current growth trajectory if we have to relocate. The whole funding round could collapse if they think we're not properly established." The young entrepreneur who had bragged about building something that lasts generations was discovering how quickly success could evaporate when built on someone else's foundation. Esther's response was perhaps the most devastating to witness because it represented the collapse of decades of careful professional construction. Her investment fund had been her life's work, built through countless 18-hour days and strategic networking that had taken her from middle management to CEO. 20 years building this fund, she said during a tense family meeting at Augustus's insistence. 20 years of relationships, of reputation, of proving myself in a male-dominated industry. You can't just... Her voice trailed off as she realized that he absolutely could and was already doing exactly that with surgical precision. Throughout this systematic dismantling of their professional lives, Toby maintained an almost clinical detachment that made his actions even more unsettling. When Rashad begged for compromise, Toby's response was measured and cold. "Every humiliation you gave me, I'm returning with interest. You spent 3 years teaching me that success is the only thing that matters to your family. I'm simply applying your own values to our relationship." The calm logic of his approach made it clear that this wasn't an emotional response. It was a business decision executed with the same strategic thinking that had built his empire. Imani found herself caught between family loyalty and grudging admiration for her husband's strategic brilliance. Watching her family scramble to salvage their professional lives forced her to confront truths she had been avoiding for 3 years. Her mother's casual cruelty, her father's condescending lectures, her brothers-in-law's dismissive attitudes, all of it had been building toward this moment when their shallow values would be tested by real consequences. They brought this on themselves, she told her sister during a difficult phone conversation. 3 years of treating him like he wasn't good enough. 3 years of making him feel unwelcome in his own family. What did they expect would happen when the truth came out? The broader Atlanta business community began taking notice as word spread through professional networks about the shift in power dynamics. Invitations that had automatically included the Blackwood family members were quietly redirected to Crawford Development Group. Board positions that had seemed secure suddenly became uncertain as companies reevaluated their relationships with all parties involved. The social capital that had taken decades to accumulate was evaporating with shocking speed, replaced by a growing recognition that Toby Crawford was someone who demanded respect rather than someone who could be safely ignored. By the end of the second week, the family's panic had evolved into something approaching desperation. Their professional lives were unraveling with mechanical precision, each day bringing new evidence of how completely their success had depended on someone they had treated as beneath their notice. The man they had dismissed as lacking ambition was systematically demonstrating exactly what ambition looked like when applied with strategic focus and unlimited resources. Their comfortable assumptions about power and status were crumbling, replaced by the terrifying understanding that they had been playing a game whose rules they never understood while sitting across the table from someone who had designed the entire system. 3 weeks of economic pressure had reduced the once proud Blackwood family to a state of complete capitulation, their professional lives hanging by threads that Toby controlled with surgical precision. The formal request for a meeting came through Rashad's legal assistant, a carefully worded document that avoided any admission of wrongdoing while making it clear that they were seeking terms for surrender. Esther, Augustus, Rashad, and Kendrick arrived at Crawford Development Group's headquarters on a gray Tuesday morning, their expensive cars looking almost apologetic in the parking lot of a building they were seeing for the first time, despite years of benefiting from its owner's business empire. The role reversal was complete and deliberate as they were escorted through marble lobbies and glass-walled conference rooms that spoke of genuine success rather than borrowed prestige. Toby waited in his corner office, the Atlanta skyline stretching behind him like a visual representation of the empire they had never suspected existed. When his assistant showed them in, their faces carried the hollow expressions of people who had discovered that their entire understanding of power had been fundamentally wrong. Esther, who had commanded boardrooms for decades, now sat across from her son-in-law with the demeanor of a junior executive requesting guidance from a superior. We need to discuss terms," Esther said, her voice carrying none of the authority that had once intimidated business rivals and family members alike. The admission represented a complete collapse of the social hierarchy they had spent 3 years enforcing, acknowledging that the man they had treated as inadequate now held their professional lives in his hands. Augustus remained silent, his surgeon's composure masking the devastation of realizing that his years of condescending lectures had been delivered to someone who controlled more wealth than his entire medical practice could generate in a lifetime. Toby leaned back in his chair, studying them with the clinical detachment of someone conducting a business negotiation rather than a family reconciliation. "I've given considerable thought to how we move forward," he said, his tone suggesting that their input was welcome but ultimately irrelevant to his decision-making process. "The Blackwood Family Business Advisory will be established immediately, with myself as permanent chairman. All major business decisions, contracts, investments, strategic partnerships will require my approval before implementation." The terms were delivered like a legal verdict, non-negotiable, and designed to establish a new power structure that reflected actual rather than assumed authority. The specifics of their new reality settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Monthly financial reports would be submitted to Crawford Development Group for review and approval. Business relationships would be coordinated through Toby's office to ensure alignment with broader strategic objectives. They would become, in essence, regional managers of their own companies, operating under the oversight of someone they had spent years treating as intellectually and professionally inferior. The irony was so complete it felt almost sadistic, yet every term was justified by their previous behavior and current dependency on his business network. Kendrick shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. "The investors, they'll want to know about these new arrangements. How do we explain the oversight structure?" His question revealed the depth of their predicament. They couldn't reveal the truth without admitting their previous misjudgment, yet they couldn't operate effectively without acknowledging their new subordinate position. Toby's smile suggested he had anticipated this concern. "You'll explain that Crawford Development Group has expanded our advisory services to include strategic partnerships with complementary businesses. Your investors will see it as a sign of stability and growth." Later that evening, in the privacy of their own home, Imani sought the conversation that would determine their marriage's future direction. "So you really did love me from the beginning?" she asked, her vulnerability evident despite everything they had been through together. The question struck at the heart of what mattered most to her, whether their relationship had been genuine or simply another element of his elaborate test. Toby took her hands, his expression softening in a way that reminded her why she had fallen in love with him 4 years ago. "I tested your character, and you passed every test," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years' careful observation. "Every month at those dinners, you supported me. You defended our relationship. You chose love over your family's pressure to find someone more suitable by their standards. They failed completely." The validation meant everything to Imani, confirming that their love story was real, even if the context had been more complex than she had understood. "You gave them 3 years to accept you," she realized aloud. 3 years to see past appearances and judge you by your character. They chose prejudice over love. Her decision crystallized with sudden clarity. "I choose the man who loved me when he thought I had nothing to offer," she said, the words carrying the finality of someone who had weighed competing loyalties and chosen based on deeper values. The contrast was stark. Her family had judged Toby based on his car and clothes, while he had judged them based on their treatment of someone they perceived as powerless. Their failure revealed everything about their character, while his patience had demonstrated his. The charity gala hosted by Crawford Development Group 2 months later served as the public demonstration of their new reality. Atlanta's business elite gathered in the ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel, their presence acknowledging Toby's position in the community's power structure. The Blackwood family attended not as hosts but as honored guests, their seating arrangement carefully designed to emphasize their subordinate but respected position within his broader business empire. Esther's introduction of Toby to potential investors carried a weight that everyone present understood. "I'd like you to meet Tobias Crawford, the visionary who guides our family's business strategy," she said, the words requiring visible effort but delivered with conviction born of necessity. The assembled crowd recognized the significance of her deference, understanding that power dynamics in Atlanta's business community had shifted in ways that demanded acknowledgement and respect. The evening represented complete vindication for Toby's patient approach to testing character. 3 years of enduring their systematic humiliation had been justified by this moment when they publicly acknowledged his worth while he graciously accepted their belated recognition. He had proven that character mattered more than appearances, that genuine success required integrity rather than inheritance, and that patience could triumph over prejudice when applied with strategic precision. Family meetings now took place in Crawford Development Group's conference rooms, complete with formal agendas and quarterly reviews that emphasized their new relationship. The mahogany table where they had once dismissed his dreams now hosted discussions of business strategies that he designed and they implemented under his guidance. The transformation was total, from unworthy husband to family patriarch, through perseverance and the eventual revelation of his true worth. The moral victory was complete, but it came with costs that would reshape their relationships forever. Toby had won their respect, but only after demonstrating that he possessed the power to destroy them professionally. They had learned to value character over appearances, but only after discovering the devastating consequences of their shallow judgment. The test was over, the results were final, and everyone involved understood exactly where they stood in the new order he had created through patience, principle, and the careful application of economic pressure. True character reveals itself not in how we treat those above us, but in how we treat those we believe are beneath us. The Blackwood family learned that respect earned through fear is hollow, while respect built on genuine worth endures forever. Would you have had Toby's patience to endure 3 years of humiliation for love? Let me know in the comments and smash that like button if this story taught you something valuable. Until next time, goodbye and see you in the next video.